Hey, this is Kevin from Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. If you want more information like you're about ready to see, go ahead and hit like and subscribe to support this independent podcast.
What we're doing here. We're going to go through the top two tiers and maybe touch on a tier from some of these, or touch on a guy or two from some of these other tiers. So I think any one of these three quarterbacks can finish QB1. And that's kind of how I've broken out these tiers for every position is who of these guys do I think can finish in the top? Who of these guys do I think can finish, in outside of that first group, and so on and so forth. So I have Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts in my top tier. I think there's a slight break, but not a huge one from Burrow and Herbert, and then on down from there. I will say that I like Kirk Cousins a lot this year for some dumb reason. Maybe I'm finally drinking the purple Kool-Aid there and from Minnesota that like the guy's just been so dang consistent that like it's hard to, go against him. So I that to me is like the sneaky play there in that fifth tier. I have a hard time. I don't know that he, gets in front of any of those guys in tiers 4 or 3, but man, you just like the consistency there. So that's how I have this broken down with guys that I think will finish QB1, like one overall, and then broken down from there.
All right. I like it. Kevin, any questions for Alex on that one?
No, I think it makes sense, right? I think we'll see some differences between Alex's and mine and yours, but I can get in line with most of this.
Fair enough. Alex, I did have one question for you. How much was the Justin Herbert ranking and tier influenced by your keeper decision in the home league?
1,000%. I need Herbert to have just a monster year to justify this first round draft pick that I spent on him 3 years ago now, or whatever it was. So I am trying to will this into existence that Herbert is a top 5 fantasy quarterback.
All right, I like it. Kevin, let's go ahead and head to your QB tiers here.
Starts out the same as Alex, right? I think anybody who has. I think everyone, for the most part, this is your top 3 set of quarterbacks, right? And then it's just kind of your flavor. What do you think? Like, Allen probably has the highest ceiling of all 3. Allen has more weeks inside of QB5 than Mahomes and Hurts do over the last 2 seasons. Allen has more weeks inside QB5 than Hurts or Mahomes. So, I mean, there's argument to be putting Allen at 1. It's hard to get away from Patrick Mahomes being the best, right? Like he just consistent, and you know exactly what you're going to get, so you're happy with that. I slid Fields up into that tier 2 because of the rushing upside. I have belief that his passing metrics are going to improve, but it's the rushing that gets you there, at least for this season, and his ability to run and scramble. So I like that getting in the top 5. And then I kind of have a bigger tier 3, and I like these guys. I don't love Lamar Jackson. I have not been shy about saying that, but Herbert, Watson, Lawrence, Tua, I think they all have good upside potential, right? Watson, because he uses his legs. Lawrence, he's kind of up and coming. He can use his legs a little bit. Jackson obviously is running less and less each year. So we're going to have to see his passing metrics really improve for me to justify moving him up anywhere from there. And Tua, honestly, he'd probably be higher up on the tier 3 end if I wasn't worried about his health. And so, I felt like this was where I was comfortable in general. Single quarterback leagues, I'm going to grab one of the guys from the top 3 tiers, right? I'm not going to go and wait. If I do, if I miss the boat and have to dip into that tier 4, I'm going to double back up here pretty quick right afterwards and grab a guy out of tier 5 with that tier 4 quarterback. because I know I'm going to have to play some matchups here a little bit.
I like it. Alex, any thoughts for Kevin on the tiers?
No, little slighted by having Herbert in your third tier, but no, I think there's a lot of good stuff here. Your fourth tier, and I know we're splitting hairs at this point, but there's a lot of there's a lot of consistency there in tier 4, and I guess you're not going to be too upset if you get any one of those guys on your roster, right?
I'm not going to be too upset. I don't feel like I'm getting the upside, right? Like,
sure.
I think that out of tier 4, your upside is somewhere around QB 8. Like, I just don't know that I am getting a differential at that point, right? He's a roster. He's a consistent piece to my roster, which, like you said, a lot of these guys are very consistent. But out of this, I mean, I think Jones might have the highest upside out of any of them just because of how he runs, right? Yeah, it's those bonus points with his legs. And then you never know. I mean, hell, Aaron Rodgers might go rough shot in New York. I don't see it happening, but it's possible, right? That he's slighted by the Packers and wants to go out and throw 45 touchdowns this season, and he ends up, inside the top 5 again.
Fair enough. All righty, and over to my my tiers here. I've got the same 3 guys, right? Tier 1's pretty universal there. Mahomes, Hurts, Allen. We kind of talked about that one. I've got tier 1B though on this one, and it was really, when I was going through and how I do my tiers, I tend to stat these guys out and kind of break it down by, kind of big anomalies as far as, how I'm projecting points out here. And Burrow was kind of, slotted in there at 4 with a pretty decent break after 1, 2, 3. And then, the next couple of guys, there was a big break there as well. So Burrow kind of becomes my 1B type of deal there. And then in tier 2, a lot of the same names, right? Herbert, Lawrence, Watson, Fields, Jackson. And then tier 3, I've got Tua, Dak, and Kirk. So realistically, like, I'm okay when I get down into drafting tier 3, like in a single QB league, kind of like that one. But if I have to get down into tier 4 when I'm drafting that one, I'm going to double tap that one, back-to-back rounds and do that and do almost a quarterback by committee, which, if you've got to do it that way, it's not a bad way to do it when, you can pair up some of these guys here and really, really put up about 20 points a game on average type of week, just by doing that, depending upon your pairing, just make sure that you don't have the same bye weeks there, and you can QB by committee on that one. So any thoughts on this one?
No, because with you having 5, I understand why you have Richardson there. I don't trust rookie QBs.
I don't either. He got moved up there just because of the rushing upside that he has, and if he runs the ball for 600 or 700 yards and punches in 8 touchdowns on the ground, he'll put up some fantasy points. That was the whole reason he got up into that range.
You're a little less bullish on Fields than I think Kevin and I are.
Which is funny because when I'm going through it, right, like I've been pretty much all offseason saying that Fields could be the third, the third year breakout quarterback that we see that takes that next step in his passing work there. And I really think that he can, but it's one of those that I think that he does just enough trading off between what he's going to gain in passing and what he's going to give up on rushing. I don't think we see another 1,000-yard rushing season from Justin Fields this year. And I think, is it possible we see him get up to 700-800 yards and some touchdowns? Sure. But, I also see that, those touchdown kind of across that group there being similar to each other.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, we're going to shift that around there. All right, I like that view better. All right, Alex, you're back on the clock here with the running back tiers.
So I saw when we went through this, I again, the way that I kind of figured this out or went with this was anybody that I think can finish RB1. And I think the reason, and you'll see in one of my co-hosts tier breakdowns, that there is a significant drop off for him between 1 and the field. And I think it's just I could see any one of these 5 finishing as the number 1 overall running back. And I had to convince myself about Bijan Robinson. I think the passing game will be just enough down there in Atlanta that it'll keep defenses honest and they won't be able to key off on him. I think it'll do just enough to allow him to get some space to run. But I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a volume thing. If Bijan Robinson finishes RB1, it's going to be because he gets the ball, Derrick Henry times, right? So that's where I'm at. I might be a little too bullish now on Tony Pollard, which we'll get to a little bit later on in the show about why. And honestly, this Jonathan Taylor ranking is solely based on, does Jonathan Taylor actually play? If Jonathan Taylor plays, then I like him here. But there's a lot of off the field stuff that could very easily move Jonathan Taylor. I mean, he could go screaming down the board here. And there's with these guys, it's just so much movement because of this here position. But this is where I've got him for now. This will change probably by tomorrow.
All right, I like it. Kevin, any questions for Alex?
I'm intrigued about some of the differences between Gibbs specifically in Tier 4 and some of these Tier 5 guys are where they are. Because I know you're big on James Conner this year. So seeing him down in your Tier 5 was a little interesting. And then you drop down to your Tier 6 and you see Pacheco, Swift, and James Cook and Gibson, all who have similar skill sets to Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yes, but have more competition in the backfield than I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have. Now, granted, David Montgomery's there in Detroit. I'm big on David Montgomery this year too. But I just think that there is more competition for those running backs than Jahmyr Gibbs. I think they're going to let Gibbs go. And I think if we get 12 weeks of Jahmyr Gibbs, if he figures it out quickly and we get 12 weeks of him, I think that's going to be enough to have him finish that high. But I mean, there's a lot riding on that. And there's also the fact that David Montgomery doesn't come in and usurp the throne there. And I could very easily swap Gibbs and Montgomery there. And I don't think I would be all that, it wouldn't be that much of a struggle for me to do that.
Okay.
Fair enough.
All righty. Kevin, you are up with your running back tiers.
So I think I have more tiers, but this is where we start. We start with 7 tiers, right? So it was McCaffrey. McCaffrey to me is kind of in a class of his own. I think we're going to see some regression out of Austin Eckler this year in Kellen Moore's offense, and so that's why he's kind of fallen back to the pack. I think we're going to see him closer in line with Chubb, Barkley, and Robinson. The volume's going to be there for Bijan, right? Like, I don't know that the efficiency is going to be there, but the offensive line in Atlanta does a pretty good job blocking for the run. That wasn't their problem last year. So I think Bijan is going to get a ton of opportunities there. And then I have Josh Jacobs listed. I clearly do not have Jonathan Taylor listed. And this is because of how I'm treating each one of their situations differently. I think Jacobs comes back, and I think Jacobs is back in about a week. So especially with Dalvin and Zeke signing, I think Jacobs needs to, take the 10.2 or whatever, 10.3, whatever $1 million deal that he has on the table and let it just ride out. But the one, because of the signing of Dalvin Cook, that's one where I'm probably missing a little bit. I need to drop Hall down to tier 4. I need to bring up Dalvin Cook here, so that way he can be in that tier 6 category, most likely, towards the back end. So a couple of different things. I have Javonte Williams and David Montgomery much higher than Alex does. I love what I'm hearing out of Broncos camp about Javonte. I cannot wait to see him play this weekend. I'm snatching him up everywhere I can. Oh, I do have Taylor on there. He's in tier 4. Okay, good. That's okay. Never mind. Sorry, I just saw that. I do have I think Javonte could be a huge breakout player. I love where he's going, the value that's there. If your draft goes wide receiver heavy at the beginning, it is okay, because in a lot of different formats you can still pick up Javonte, you can pick up Connor, Javonte, James Cook, and Penny, right? And kind of build your backfield that way a little bit if you're going more wide receiver heavy. But I'm interested to see how things continue to shake out. Obviously, Breece Hall dropping down, Stevenson probably dropping down there as well. I think I would probably end up raising Harrison Mixon up. Like, I think that's where that switch is between that tier 4. So Harrison Mixon for me would now go up into tier 3, the back end of tier 3, but still there. And then Hall and Stevenson would drop down to the top end of tier 4 is kind of where I see it now. But I feel comfortable with this, and I'm comfortable taking different backs, obviously throughout the draft and how it falls. But I really am comfortable with how this would play out to me on my big board, right? As they get drafted, just check them off the list and keep working down. But I feel like for me, this is situated where I can work this out, and I can put together a good running back room just by following this board.
I was going to say, you've got to absolutely love the ADP and how this kind of falls to you throughout the drafts, just based on how you kind of have these guys situated out and where current ADP sits for a lot of these guys, especially guys like Javonte, Montgomery, James Conner, kind of all in that mix. All guys going 6th, 7th, 8th round in a lot of cases.
Yeah, yes. I love where their current ADPs are, and I love that you can play off of this really from any draft position, right? Whether you're going 1, 5, 8, 12, it doesn't really matter. Like, you can get a good composition regardless of how things are kind of shaken out for you. So I like the mix. There's some things that I'm interested, right? Now that Dobbins sounds like he's getting close to coming back here and being active for the Ravens. So I would like to see him in a preseason game. He might end up getting kicked up to that tier 5, quite possibly. And same thing with Pacheco as he works his way back from injury as well, right? If he's able to kind of show that he's going to be not necessarily the feature for Kansas City, but if he's going to be heavily involved in the running game and then sprinkled in the passing game, I think that sprinkle, because the Chiefs throw the ball so much, is enough to possibly inch Isaiah Pacheco up. Possibly not, because I do think Aaron Jones and Travis Etienne there in tier 5 are, I think they're quite a bit more reliable than what Isaiah Pacheco is.
Fair enough. All right, let's hit up mine. So mine are a little different there. I've got McCaffrey, Eckler in that 1 tier. Again, I think I do think the Eckler still sees some pretty good workload there. There has not been a single player that has scored more touchdowns over the last 2 seasons than Austin Eckler. So yes, Kellen Moore coming in, changing that offense does concern me a little bit there, but I'm just going to go off a guy that shows up, shows out, and puts the ball in the end zone there, and should still see a lot of receiving work there. So I've got McCaffrey, Eckler in that tier 1, Chubb, Barkley, and Bijan in that tier 2, and then kind of a little bit bigger tier 3 there with Henry, Pollard, Harrison, Stevenson, Mixon, Taylor, and Jacobs. And Taylor and Jacobs are some that could potentially fall down to tier 4 just based on when they report and some of those things there. And then just kind of have that grouping together there of guys that tier 4, really kind of like these guys, really like where they're coming off the board, and really like what I can do with my draft room. Same thing with tier 5. So a lot of these times when I'm drafting, I'm going out and I'm drafting somebody in either tier 1, tier 2, early on, and then I'm just kind of loading up in tier 4, tier 5, and really building out a running back room there. And with the ADP of how these guys are falling, really, really like how they're coming off the board and how that's situating to me. Any thoughts on this one?
How'd you have Rachaad White statted out?
I will have to pull that.
Off the top of your head?
Rachaad White, I saw him having kind of just an overall mixture there. Like he was going to beat about 225 carries, I think, and roughly about 50 to 60 targets. So he'll do well. It's more of a case of I don't necessarily trust the offense around him to be able to put together consistent drives and be able to put the ball in the end zone consistently enough for him to have been moved up into tier 4. Because when I was going through, I was really thinking that he'd be in that tier 4 type of deal. But just from a consistency standpoint, he got bumped down to the start of the tier 5. And it has everything to do with all that offense and what I think Tampa Bay is going to do. And I think Tampa Bay is going to have a much more difficult time punching the ball in the end zone than we've seen the last couple of seasons. So that was really kind of where it came down to, is just I don't know that we're going to see enough sustained drive, enough of those drives ending with point afters instead of field goals. So, any other thoughts on this one? All righty. Alex, you're up with your wide receiver tiers here.
Sure. Again, I've got Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill. There are my top 3, my first tier. I've moved Cooper Kupp down a little bit, and I don't know. I just feel like maybe he's on the decline, and I could see him having the same statistical season. That's the word I'm looking for. As Stephon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb. Amon-Ra St. Brown and AJ Brown there. I have them kind of listed in this order, but yeah, the more I kind of talk myself through it, like Amon-Ra St. Brown is right there. I think really it's a negligible between any of these 5 here in my second tier. So. And then obviously it is another difficult position to figure out, consistent basis. I think Devontae Adams there in my third tier is perhaps my biggest stretch, just because the quarterback play in Las Vegas, I think is going to be at a huge detriment to that guy.
Fair enough. Any thoughts out there for him on this one?
No, for me, Christian Watson, I think is a touch too high, but I think we've kind of explained why in our shows, right? We just think Dobbs is going to end up showing a bit better. Like I understand why Watson's there, but I don't know. I don't draft. I actively avoid him in his current ADP. Just because I don't feel like the return is there. So I think that kind of dilutes my thoughts on him a little bit. Same thing with Debo.
Absolutely. I mean, you see where I've got Debo at. Like I just, with a full season of Christian McCaffrey, like what are they going to do with Debo Samuel now? Right. Because like CMC is going to take over a lot of those odd gadget run end around plays. Like, that's all going to go to CMC now. And we kind of saw that last year, but like, he wasn't there for a full season. Now that he's got the full season, the full off season, Kyle Shanahan's been able to, work with him and explain things a little bit more, or just get more comfortable with, who he is as a player. I just think that like Debo Samuel loses out on a lot of those options, and then what? Right.
All righty. Kevin, you're up here on your wide receiver tiers.
This was the hardest group for me to tier out and find out where I really felt like my breaks were. But that being said, I still have Cup in that tier 1, sheerly volume based. It's same with McVay being the head coach, and as long as Matt Stafford is healthy in LA, I think Cooper Cup is going to get fed early and often. His route running is strong enough that he will be able to create separation, even though he's getting a little bit older and bouncing back from a couple injuries. But outside of that, tier 2 is honestly, tier 2 is kind of where I end up picking most of my guys. I just haven't had a whole lot of opportunity to be at the top end of drafts and grab the tier 1 guys. But tier 2, tier 3, I've spent a good number of drafts picking from that tier. Ridley is dangerously close to getting moved up, and I think the only reason he's not is because he sat out last year due to suspension. So, but in that tier 3, I think that's pretty much how my rankings lay out too. Like Ridley is at the very top of tier 3. Olave is right behind him. I think he's going to see a big year. And then Waddle, Cooper, Higgins. I think we see Devonta Smith slip just a little bit from where he was last year. But once I kind of got this going, I felt better about it. But man, there's so many receivers. You can go on and on and on. Some of these tiers, a lot of people might group together as we kind of get further down into the draft board, but there's definitely guys I'm highlighting, right? Like tier 6. If I can get in a tier 6, I'm grabbing Cortland Sutton first in that tier. I'm grabbing George Pickens second, and then I'm probably grabbing Cooks third, right? Like we talked about last week, how I'm really fading Hollywood Brown. Like just this Kyler thing has me worried. We really haven't gotten any update of how Kyler's coming along, when we really expect him back. I've started to grab him late as a second quarterback in some leagues where my starter has like a back half of the season bye, right? Like if he has weeks 5, 6, 7, or 8 as a bye week, I'm not grabbing Kyler. But if he's week 9 or later, like I'm taking that gamble right now because I can get Kyler at such a discount that I'll fill in for that bye week there. So maybe it will help out with Marquise Brown once he comes back. But this wide receiver group is it's fun. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of talent, right? So it gives you plenty of ability to switch back and forth between these running back tiers in here, right? You can grab a tier 1 running back and a tier 2 wide receiver. And if you're on one of the turns and you're not hell-bent on grabbing a tier 1 quarterback, you can almost, you can get 2 out of the top 2 tiers between running back and wide receiver and really set a good anchor for your team. So I like it. The one I'm not – I think the one that I can't decide on and I'm leaning – I've been hearing a lot of good things again is Gabe Davis. Like I think he's creeping up my board a little bit personally, but his ADP is not creeping up, so I like it. So I can leave him down in that tier and know that I like him. So you highlight him or star him or do whatever you do to kind of keep an eye on it. But I can grab him out of that tier 5. And, a lot of times he's going later than that. So I know he's going to slip out of that group for me. And I can pick him up a round or 2 later after some of the others kind of get picked around.
I like it. Any thoughts, Alex?
No, I agree with you, Kevin. Like this was a really difficult position group to kind of figure out. Again, obviously they are reliant upon good quarterback play. I've said it once. I'll say it 1,000 times. Best receiver is only as good as the quarterback throwing him the football. So, it's a really difficult group, I think, to stat out.
Fair enough. All right, so my tiers. Kevin and I were really the tier 1 and tier 2 were the same there. Tier 3 kind of mixes up a little bit there. I don't necessarily have as many guys in that tier 3 to it. Tier 4, a little bit bigger there. So one of those that, again, where the draft is kind of fallen and how these things are coming off the board. Love the fact that I can go and I can get, my tier 1, tier 2 guy and then follow it up with several guys in tier 3, tier 4 for me and really kind of round out that room there. And then, tier 5, tier 6, there's some definite value to be had there. But what thoughts do you guys have on this one?
I'm shocked that none of us have Romeo Doubs higher. And part of it's ADP, right? Like,
right.
You know where he's going right now. And so until everyone around you shifts, you don't really need to, right? Maybe you grab him 1 round early. You don't have to grab him 2 rounds early to make sure you get him.
Right.
I know when we're doing these mocks, it's always a race to see who's grabbing Dobbs and who's grabbing Sutton, right? Late in the draft, he's there. You kind of take who you think going to be the alpha on that team. So as you're rounding out the last bit of your wide receiver room for some depth, some high upside, some volume play, whatever you're looking for, it's who's grabbing Dobbs and who's grabbing Sutton. And then the other 2 guys amongst the 3 of us are always going, oh, damn you. Like, I was going to take him that route too.
There's a lot of convincing yourself, like, okay, maybe he'll be around for the next time I come up. Like, and that's the game you play with yourself, right? Is okay, if I don't take him now, what do I think my chances are of getting him the next round? Or am I going to have to pull the trigger in a round that I'm a little too uncomfortable pulling the trigger on that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's the whole reason he didn't make it in here, is just on the ADP side of things. I don't really have to worry about this one because he's going 2-3 rounds later than, Cortland Sutton or Elijah Moore, or, any of these other guys in that tier 6 for me. But if it's one of those that I've got to draft him over some guys, like I'm going to draft Romeo Doubs over Watson. I draft him over Debo. I'd draft him over Marquise Hollywood Brown, Michael Thomas, Deontay Johnson. Like, there's a lot of guys that if I like, it's one of those that I've got him and I've got some of these other guys kind of in that I had to pick one of them. He's the guy that I would take on that one. So willing to spend up and willing to do that because I think that the upside on him is going to be huge. And I love the fact that with the ADP you get him way late. So. All righty, into the tight ends here. This is Alex's favorite tiers, is the tight ends.
And realistically, there isn't a 4th tier. There's only 3 tiers here. It is Kelsey.
Your 4th tier was everybody else.
Yeah, it is Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson, and then the field. Well, I guess that's true. Yeah, my 4th tier is the field. So I just look. It is, as we've said on this, it's Kelsey or bust. You can wait on Andrews or Hawkinson, but I think realistically, those guys are going to go before you need to pick a tight end, and then you can just wait, pick a guy that you're comfortable with week 1, and then stream from there.
All righty. Kevin, let's go ahead and hit up your tiers on the tight ends.
So I broke mine out a little bit differently, but same sentiment, right? I mean, Kelsey's in a tier all by himself. I think that tier 2 is a lot of it's volume based, right? It's Andrews being, for all intents and purposes, he's the top target in Baltimore until he's not, right? Todd Monken's offense might dictate something else, but until that happens, Andrews is right there. Hawkinson, while I think we see a little bit of regression from kind of his peak performances last year with the Vikings, I think he's going to be an integral part of that offense to help keep pressure off of Kirk Cousins and use him as a relief valve and kind of a dump off while Addison and Jefferson are getting down the field and open. Kittle's his only thing is health, right? Can Kittle stay healthy? But he's, again, another guy, plays a big role in the passing game, and he is Brock Purdy's buddy, right? Brock Purdy loves him some George Kittle, and he loved him some Brandon Ayuk. Debo was not necessarily an afterthought, but he was down the pecking order with Brock Purdy at quarterback, and then Darren Waller. So if I'm going to grab a tier 2 tight end, it's going to be Darren Waller. There is a very good chance that he leads the Giants in targets, receptions, and touchdowns this year. And there's not many guys like this or like that in this tight end set, right? And they are all, well, Hawkinson being the exception, but the other 4 guys between tier 1 and tier 2 all have that capability for their respective teams. And then you kind of get into tier 3, which is the last, I think that's the last volume-based tight end that you're going to see. And then I really like tier 4. If I'm waiting on tight end, I'm grabbing tier 4. Those are the guys that I do really like. Higbee and Everett go way late as far as tight ends go. They're starting to creep up a little bit. Like, people are starting to catch on. So I'm going to have to kind of figure out where my tolerance is on how soon I'm willing to grab them, or if I'm still rounding out some other positions. But I like, and we've been able to do it in a couple of different leagues. Just if you're close to that turn and you've been waiting on tight end, that double tap towards the end of your draft between Everett and Higbee is really nice. It's really nice to have. So I like that a lot. And then, much like the rest, right, tier 5 and 6 are so touchdown dependent. So touchdown dependent. All these guys are to some extent. But really, once you get into tier 4, yeah, they're touchdown dependent, but you think that they're going to see a baseline of, 4 or 5 targets a game. And then tier 5 for me is, there's going to be weeks where they only see 1 or 2 targets. And if they don't fall into the end zone, there's a chance you end up with a goose egg.
Fair enough. All righty. My tight end tiers here. We had Kelsey, tier amongst himself. Then it looks very similar as far as the top 2 tiers compared to Alex there. Andrews, Hawkinson, tier 2. Tier 3 had Kittle, Pitts, Waller, Evan Ingram in there. And really, where it kind of comes down to me is I really like waiting all the way down there to tier 5. If I'm not going to spend up for Kelsey in round 1, I really like waiting into tier 5 and just getting getting two of these 3 guys in my tier 5 to bring that thing home. Like, yeah, you can pick them up 11th, 12th, 13th round, and been able to find that consistently. Just Kevin just mentioned the double tap on that, and just being able to double tap in the 11th and 12th or 12th and 13th, and be able to get the tight end committee there that should be able to rock and roll for me. Any thoughts or questions on any of our tight end tiers?
I mean, it is what it is with this position group, right?
Right. Travis Kelce or bust. Exactly.
Yep.
All righty. So that's gonna wrap up the tiers there.